Hello my friends, how are you doing? So in this video I will show you my ideas for the first photo project of this year. 3 different ideas. You can decide. I want to get your feedback, which of them you like most, if you would change something. All of them are set up to be simple projects because of the learning process. Because when you have a simple project, it's easier to spot problems, it's easier to handle them, and still there's a ton of variation and complexity in them because nothing in life is really easy. So let's get started, have a look at these ideas, and let me know what you think. Also, by the way, keep in mind that all of the photos I showed you today are just test photos. They are not final, they're not edited. These are just to see if there is anything there, if the idea has any kind of potential. The real photos I'm going to take once I've decided which kind of project I will actually do. So here we are at one of the places for my photo project ideas. And these are these kind of lost places, strange places. They are part of our society, of our culture. But at the same time, they're kind of forgotten places, places that exist because of regulations or just out of necessity. But we don't really care for them and we don't really use them often or at all. And then all this kind of waste comes here, but the waste also has some story to itself, which is really interesting. And also, I found that this is kind of a border of our society, an outside, an edge of our society, and this is what happens to that. We always perceive ourselves, as so elaborate, sophisticated, educated, cultured, like what mankind is, doing these amazing things, doing art and music and flying to space. But at the moments where we don't pay attention, where we don't pick up the trash behind us, down there's an e-scooter, there is a sleeping bag, so really also things that represent our society. And what I also found interesting about these places is that they kind of look similar to what happens at the edges of our society, right? If you think about war situations, it looks kind of like that. If you think about poverty, it kind of looks like that. If you go to poor areas of the town, for example, right? Things are run down, trash is lying around, so can look like that, right? Chaos in your mind can also be filled up with this kind of trash. It also feels like this kind of chaos, all these kind of pieces floating around that you can't really put together. So there's a lot of similarities, and this is why I find this so interesting. It's at the same time a non-existent place that doesn't really have a place in our mind, in our social system, and how we see ourselves. At the same time, it tells so much about who we are and maybe has more to tell about us than the other places that are so clean and pristine and prepared for that, like an opera building or these beautiful high-rise skyscrapers from important companies who build campuses and all these kind of things, and everything is shiny. And then on the other end we have this, but because in a certain sense also society and culture functions like our brain functions. The things that we remember are as important than the things that we forget. And in the things that we forget about ourselves and that we sometimes even really want to forget, to press out of existence, the most important things might happen, especially in retrospect when you look back at them and try to figure out what happened at that point. You find a lot of things about yourself, like a mirror, like a reflection where you can learn about the other side of what is happening. So in that sense, it might be an interesting project. Of course, I realize that maybe visually it might not be that attractive. Would people, for example, buy a picture or buy a book about trashed places that are filled with crap? I find them visually interesting. Maybe that is a book that needs a lot of text and story with it, where you write about it, philosophical concepts like I just told you, and that might make the pictures more interesting than they are on their own. But I always found that these places do have their own very interesting aesthetic too. So the next photo idea would be to photograph these entrances here, not just this single door, but actually the full door frame, as you can see here. But as you can see, it's a very beautiful door, but then when you go further away, the house doesn't have much ornaments on them. So the house is very different than the door. When you compare it to, for example, over here, There's another house and that has more ornaments. So it could be really interesting to have a photo project where you photograph these different doors and how they differentiate from each other. And I already found there is a lot of variations. And of course, sometimes these old doors are replaced by new doors that are not even closely that nice because they have been, for example, replaced by a glass door. And that can be interesting because when you don't have a glass door, when you have a wooden door, inside it's dark and there might be some stuff happening, like drunk people go inside and like relieve themselves. Like with a glass door, you don't have this nice and bright inside and nothing can happen. So yeah, that could be a possibility. But then on the other hand, the question is, when you photograph that, it looks kind of minimal, but actually you can do a lot of things with that because you can, for example, decide, does it always have to be for the front? Does it always have to be in the same sunlight situation? Can it be that there is a car in front of that? Can I correct the perspective so it's actually flat and it looks nice? Or does it have to be like it was photographed? So documentary questions also, right? And should it be in black and white, or is the color of the house important for that kind of project, for that kind of idea? So yeah, there's a lot of different variations you can do with that. I also thought about that I photographed the house with the full facade and then I cut just that area where you have the windows and the door, which mostly there is a line of windows right above the door. And in Vienna, it's really interesting because these different levels that you live in, they have a different design for each level. So here you can actually see that. When you look at that behind me, you can see that the first floor here has the nicest window decorations, and then the one above has less, and the one above has even less than that. Although you often also have to look in Vienna at the highest part where the roof starts, because there you often also have very beautiful sculptures, ornaments, other elements that make the house really beautiful. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility. But another element of this is the element of repetition. And that is, I feel, really important for a project, because beauty can come out of repetition. When you have a lot of similar elements that you compare to each other, out of the comparison, you get something that is more than the individual parts, that creates something that has a meaning and a purpose and has a beauty and a rhythm to it. And through that, just by repetition of these simple elements, you can create something that's actually really interesting. I also very interested in what you think about that and what you would decide which is the more interesting, more important project. The last idea for a photo project would be to photograph buildings across the corner like this. And visually it looks cool and it might be nice, but actually I kind of already decided against it. But I still want to present you with that idea because maybe you like it. And what I don't like about it is it looks nice, but you don't really see many details because it's at an angle, everything is far away, you can't really see the ornaments, you can't really enjoy what is going on there. And the only thing I like about that really is that perspective effect, and it looks large and it looks impressive, and especially when you make a wide angle photo, maybe also with the foreground, it could be interesting. I think in that case you would have to bring in more of the foreground to show the surrounding in which that house is standing, and then maybe there would be a story where you have, like for example, a nice house in an ugly surrounding, or an ugly house in a nice surrounding. All these kind of things that can happen. When I think about the other ideas, I like them more. So I want to know what you think about that, if you think that could be something, or how you would change any of these projects, because I think there's a lot of potential to change them. At the same time, I want to point out that for me it's really important that these projects have a simplicity in them. And the reason for that is because as the first project of that year, I want to have something where I have a lot of control over it and that doesn't take a ton of planning to do it. And then I can experiment with that. And if it fails, it's not that big of a deal. Because if you think about having a photo project where, for example, you would have to have models that come around, or you would go along with, I don't know, like a market tender and move with them around for months and see what they are doing. If this fails, you have wasted a lot of time, not only for yourself, but also for other people. The planning and all that is a real big thing. So for the first thing, keep it small. And also another thing that I find really interesting about that is with this project, you can see something that I think can be really interesting. And at the same time, it's a very small thing which everybody can do. Because this is a lot what people tell me from my community is that they say, yeah, but I don't really have something I can photograph because, I don't know, I'm in a small village or I don't leave my home so much or stuff like that. You can find small things that might be interesting. Of course, in this case, also I'm outdoors, but still, they are small things. And you can find something similar that you can do, so it doesn't always have to be super elaborate with models and locations and studios and makeup and all these kind of things. So there you are. These are my 3 photo project ideas for the first project in 2022. Let me know which one you liked best, or maybe you didn't like any of them at all. I want to know that too. Looking forward to your feedback and see you tomorrow in my next tutorial.